Good. The leading United Nations platform on artificial intelligence. Organized by the International Telecommunication Union, the United Nations Agency for Digital Technologies, in partnership with over 50 UN agencies, and co-convened with Switzerland. The mission of AI for Good is to unlock AI's potential to serve humanity. As a multi-stakeholder platform, AI for Good advances solutions, standards, and skills. In today's AI for Good event, we are counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging session. Boost your AI skills and elevate your career with the AI for Good Discovery Badge. Receive verified digital credentials that recognize your engagement in cutting-edge sessions, exploring how AI is being used to tackle global challenges. To see if a session is eligible, look for the blue badge banner on the right side of the video interface that activates at the end of each live session. Share your badge on LinkedIn and across your professional profiles, and check the AI for Good events webpage for upcoming eligible online sessions. Discovery Badge sessions are part of the AI Skills Coalition, ITU's global initiative to strengthen credible AI learning pathways and expand access to high-quality, trustworthy AI knowledge worldwide. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished facilitators and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is...
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from me as well. My name is Guilherme Martinez Roura from the International Telecommunication Union, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to today's AI for Good Discovery event on robots in the city, discovering implicit social expectations for human robots. In this session, we will explore how robots are beginning to operate in urban spaces, from delivery and cleaning to safety and city monitoring. The talk will examine why successful deployment depends not only on the technical capabilities, but also on understanding the implicit social norms that shape public interactions. And drawing from field experiments, the talk and our distinguished speaker today will show how real-world urban environments reveal the unspoken expectations robots must learn to navigate. This event is part of the AI and Robotics Discovery Series, which features expert talks on research and innovation in autonomous and intelligent systems, and how these technologies can really help advance some of humanity's biggest challenges. And we have a very distinguished speaker with us today. And as always, we're counting on your participation in making this a very engaging session. And you are welcome to share your questions in the AI for Good Neural Network platform, and we will take them during the Q&A segment. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today. She's Wendy Zhu, and she's Associate Professor of Information Science at Cornell University. Wendy, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. I'm going to just start my talk now. All right, so I'm going to tell you about studying the work I've been doing studying robots in urban environments. And just here on the first slide, I'm showing the robots we've been using. We've been doing experiments with trash bale robots, which are not super sophisticated. They move around, but they do the job of helping us understand how people are going to interact with robots when the robots are in their space in the city. I want to mention that my campus is this Cornell Tech campus, which is in New York City. You can see here the campus, which is in the foreground, is on Roosevelt Island, and behind in the background here is Manhattan. So one of the things that makes me quite excited to do this research is that I am around New York City all the time. I can see all these different places and different people, and it makes me aware of how the technologies that we're developing often aren't taking into account what it will be like to actually, be out in the world. The Cornell Tech campus is a campus with a mission. If I could just do a small plug, it's a graduate school and research center of Cornell University located in New York City. It was established after winning a $400 million competition to build an applied sciences campus on the island. And as part of that award, Cornell Tech is promised to do external engagement, to think really hard about how the digital technologies that are being developed now are helping people, which is in line with the AI for Good mission. So the campus mission emphasizes applying technology to real-world challenges and engaging with external partners. This line of research I'm going to show actually started further back before I joined Cornell Tech in 2018. This is a video from Stanford, where I was a research scientist prior to this professorship. I'm just going to show you this experiment which took place on the Stanford campus, which laid the ground for the work that I'm going to show after.
Right behind you. Don't come any closer. Oh, look at that. Don't come any closer. No closer. We don't have any garbage.
Okay? Are you okay? This is over here. Here you go.
So some things I want to point out that are obvious from watching these videos are that people are talking to the robot, usually not just to like put away the trash. They don't usually need to talk to the robot to do that. But when the trash barrel is not doing something that they expect, like if they think it's asking for trash for too long, or if it gets stuck, people are talking to the robot and they seem to expect the robot to understand, even though the robot doesn't talk back. I should mention that the research protocol that we used for this study was something that's called the Wizard of Oz protocol. In a Wizard of Oz study, instead of using an actual automated system, which is programmed to behave just one way, we actually have a human person remotely acting as the automation. And that makes it possible for a robot to adapt to situations that we never anticipated. And so the wizard can basically improvise because they have all of the knowledge and the human understanding what's going on, but only the skills and the capabilities for interaction that the robot has. So the wizard can actually act through the robot to try to do the right thing so that we can actually understand how the interactions should go when we have automation. And so one of the really interesting things about this study is that we don't lie to people, but we don't explain to people how the robot operates. And so a lot of the things that people do, those are the interesting things for us to know as roboticists. And there are all sorts of things that we would never anticipate. So I think we had hoped to find out if people would understand what the robot was for, if they would understand how to interact with it. That was no problem. there were certainly situations where, as I mentioned, the robot didn't do quite the right thing, and people would explain, like, we don't have any garbage, which is like, you don't have to come closer because we don't have any garbage. But there was also this very comedic moment where a child was trying to bait the garbage can to where he wanted it to go by holding out garbage and then walking in front of it like it's a dog, that you're offering food to. And this is such an interesting model. I think we very often, when we develop robots, think about what is the equivalent, human equivalent. There's like people who are bus people that like collect garbage, clean tables. We thought the garbage can was something like that, or a helper for something like that. But when we saw this child, we were laughing really hard. We're like, he thinks like a garbage can is begging for garbage. And then once we saw that, when we were doing analysis, we started to realize that actually all sorts of people are doing that. And that's why we showed this clip with this person, holding a chopstick wrapper, but whistling at the trash barrel like he has a bacon treat for a dog. So we thought this was very funny. And one of these things that, is exactly the sort of thing you would never know unless you were in the field studying the interaction. So when I moved to New York, I was really interested in replicating this kind of study, and trying to see, here where it's many years later or across an entire continent, do we see the same behaviors? And that's leads us to this video.
In this study, we deployed 2 trash barrel robots to study how people interact with autonomous everyday objects in public space. Equipped with 360 cameras, our robots were powered by recycled hoverboards, and we made 2 robots to separate landfill and recycling. Our study area is constrained within the trapezium-shaped traffic island called Astor Place in Manhattan, New York City. The space is set up with several metal tables and chairs for public seating. We used a Wizard of Oz deployment method to elicit natural interaction behaviors from people who perceive our robots to be autonomous.
There you go.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah. Yeah. There's trash here. Yes. Yes. Oh, good boy. Oh, there you go. Oh, good boy. Good. Oh, that's recycling. Oh, you're a bad boy. You don't know what you're doing. Yeah. It's okay. They're learning. So they're still pups.
Someone was like rolling away from someone earlier, and then I realized they're buddies. And they're doing their job. So people can call. I guess it knows I've been sitting here long enough. I should give it something. Okay. Come here, buddy. Thank you. Good job. That's creepy. That's just freaking creepy.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
It's the cup, bro.
I'll give him a straw.
All right, so one of the very exciting things here is that you can see a lot of the things that we observed in California are happening here in New York City. We can see people also helping the robot when the robot gets stuck, that people talk to the robot all the time. the baiting of the robot, trying to move the robot by baiting it with trash, that is still happening. And then some of the things that people are saying let us know the things they're assuming, which are surprising. Like one guy said that they're learning. I think it's a really surprising thing to expect that something that's deployed in public would change after you've started using it, but that this is the model. And then the thing that the woman was saying about the trash barrels being buddies means that they have some expectation that the robots know about one another, you know, and their efforts are coordinated, which is also a big assumption, but it's good to know is kind of what people are, you know, implicitly assuming. And she also says, I guess it knows how long I've been sitting, you know, and so there's this realization that, oh, we probably need to track people and how long they've been sitting, because you don't want to approach a person after, you know, they just arrived, but it would be kind of rude not to collect the garbage after a while. So some of these are the kinds of things that we have learned. And I think this kind of research is important because we're actually increasingly seeing robot services, robot machines being deployed in public urban spaces. Of course, there's always been many robots, you know, the last 50 years in like factories and construction sites, but now they're being deployed in, you know, our everyday neighborhoods. This is like a really early work. This is something called TweenBot, which was done by Casey Kinzer from NYU. And she just wanted to explore like a really small, humble robot. It's just a cardboard robot that can only move in one direction, but it has a flag saying that it wants to go to the opposite corner of Washington Square Park. And then here's a video of that. Project, but now we like this is, and then here's a research project. This was actually an autonomous city explorer that was deployed in Vienna downtown in a public square, and its goal on that little screen was to actually give people directions. But like, you know, that it could talk to people, it could move around, it could actually do some imaging of the environment, and so, you know, this is something that's being explored because more people think that this kind of, you know, application like a tour guide is possible. This is from, you know, 2009. So now we're actually starting to see those kinds of things come into commercial practice. One really notable company is Serve Robotics. They actually went public quite recently, and they have delivery robots that are being deployed in all sorts of different deployments around the world. I particularly like this one because of the way it's decorated. I think this is the snazziest public robot I have seen. But you've seen different versions of these, you know, in urban spaces all over the world. And I think sometimes if you look online, there'll be pictures, videos of these robots getting stuck or being in social situations where I think there's a notable one where there's one of these delivery robots trying to get around a police cordon, doesn't understand what a police cordon is, and is just trying to plow into this. And in the end, they end up just letting it go through because they couldn't figure out how to stop it, you know, or tell it to go around. There are security robots, sometimes in busy places where, you know, there might be pickpockets or, you know, some sort of nefarious activity. There are people who think it's useful to deploy a robot that like just watches, but records things so that if they need to like have the footage later, they have some footage from the environment. This is surveillance, of course. And then there are things as mundane as like mowing the lawn or, you know, doing a lot of things that are background activities, cleaning the streets. There are a lot of things that we have municipal services that do these things, but we could have more. And we can also it would be useful to have things that could be deployed a little bit on demand as they're needed. And so robots are really good for that if they can be operated safely around people. Here's a street cleaning robot. Crombie is I think a Scandinavian country. So it's prepared to deal with snow and dirt. Really nice. So the thing I've been really interested in is this idea of trash bots in the borough square, in places which are highly populated. And I'm going to show you a few short clips from the larger studies we've done. The first place that we actually did our studies was in Astor Place in New York City. You've seen different views of this space, but one of the reasons why we picked this location is that it's close to this cafe. So there are people who are sitting there eating, they have some garbage. So we would go for 2 hours around the lunchtime when people are likely to be eating and likely to be generating garbage and circle around. Here, one of the things that we noticed is that there's a kind of a typical structure of the way that people interact with robots. I think in the previous video, we really highlighted things where people are interacting with the robots, but some of the interactions, which are just around the kind of offering of trash and the picking up of trash, they have kind of an interesting, typical, almost linguistic structure, and that's what's explored in this video. So you can see there's normally like an offer that where the extended arm, and held away from the table helps kind of communicate that there's a, and then the end of that, occurs after the robots come, which is the uptake, and then they release the garbage. In this case, this is what happens when people feel like the garbage can asks, for the garbage. This one was called a drive-by. There's no preamble, it just happened. So this is a set of clips looking at how just the need to basically figure out who's going to go and who's going to go around, who's going to yield. People are basically trying to understand what the robot's going to do. One thing that we have to contend with nowadays is that everyone has a camera. Some of the most interesting videos of this work were not videos that we took, and not analysis that we had, but things that we found that found us. So I pointed out those people who had cameras. Actually, if you were watching the videos, there were lots of people taking videos of the trash barrels during the deployment. And someone sent me this TikTok that she encountered online of our robots.
Do ba 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 do boo do.
So this is really funny. A couple of things. So Eric Adams was the mayor of New York City at the time, and you can see the caption says that Eric Adams doing the most with the New York City sanitation budget. And I think that's a sarcastic statement. It's like, why are we spending the sanitation budget on on these robots? And I think one of the interesting things about this is that, we hadn't really asked this question of whose robots are these when we were designing the robot. I think we thought they would be generically for someone. It could always be for someone else, like a company or a business, but it matters a lot to the people who are encountering the robot, whose robot it is. And in fact, a lot more people asked us who was behind the robots than asked us how the robots worked. Like, you know, I was pretty proud of the hoverboard base and stuff, but nobody asked us about that. The comments for this video were also really enlightening. Here is a comment that says, yeah, well, he needs to send them to all of the boroughs. And then someone says, like, it's a waste of money, especially in New York City. Crime has gone up substantially. And someone says, nah, wouldn't last in the Bronx. And this is not a one-off. Here's an example. And said, lovely, there's so many neighborhoods in the Bronx in need of a cleanup, and this is what we get. And I think that question of where should the robots be deployed is a really good one. Midtown Manhattan, which is a highly trafficked area, that's why we picked that location, is also a really well-to-do area. It's near NYU University and also Cooper Union. There's a lot of people who are commuters, but also tourists. And the argument here is that there's many of the outer boroughs where we mostly have residents, where we don't actually have this kind of assistance. And that motivated us to think hard about how we can do these kinds of studies, but in other places in New York City. And so actually at this point, we have done deployments in all of these different places. I haven't published all of them. I'm going to show you some of the videos from Albee Square, but we also just last summer did deployments in Tappan Park on the Staten Island, in Astoria Park in Queens, and in Little Italy in the Bronx. Here's a news article. I think sometimes we have to actually do these in exchange for press because we're so excited just to see like something like a trash bill robot in the outer rows. So we understand these are things that a lot of people are excited to see, just like more what these things mean for everyday residents. And I'm going to fast forward to Astor Place. Actually, I'm going to show you so we can contrast some of the interactions we had in Astor Place and then some of the interactions we had in Albee Plaza in downtown Brooklyn. These are students, I'm guessing, from the back part and the homework.
Yeah. She had so much on her. Hi. Aw. He's waving. Hi, I don't have any trash. No trash here.
Thank you very much. Come on. No, that was it. I don't know.
So you can see people are pretty polite. A lot of times, even if they don't have an interaction, they're like apologizing a little bit for it, but they're also trying to help the robot understand that was the end of the interaction. And one of the things that has been a repeated theme in our research is how much people are explaining to the robot how it should be interacting. And there is not yet one commercial robot that actually listens for and learns from these kinds of things that people are saying, but people are explaining all the time how the robot should behave. This was an example that was in the original video, but it's really fun to see from this other perspective.
Yes, here we go. Come on, come on. No, wait, yeah, no, I need you. Yeah. Come on. Oh, yeah. There's trash here. Yes. Oh, good boy. Oh, there you. Oh, good boy. Oh, that's recycling. Oh, you're a bad boy. You don't know what you're doing. It's okay. They're learning. So they're still pups.
They're still pups. Here is an interaction from Albee Plaza.
Excuse me, I'm having my ice cream. Isn't it empty? Hello, I'm still having my ice cream. Get away from me. I have no garbage. Hello? Get up.
This is one of my favorite, things we managed to collect in the field ever. At the beginning, you can see the woman is a little bit, entertained, explaining, that she doesn't have trash. She's holding something, but it still has ice cream, you know. And then when the trash bell comes by her table later on, she is quite irritated, and she explains like that she still doesn't have trash, you know, I have no garbage, you know, and so she's really trying to emphasize like this something. And one of the things about this kind of interaction is you can tell that people expect the robot to recognize them the second time it encounters them, and moreover to remember the things that they told it the first time. One of the things that's been really wonderful about some of the studies we've done in the outer boroughs is that we've been able to like encounter the same people, because unlike in Manhattan, it's a lot of people who like treat the squares as their, you know, extended living room or where they meet up with friends. And so we encounter the same people quite often.
Consoladores.
Se llama hierba. Órale, ¡ay, no vas a tirar las plantas del muchacho! ¡Ay, va a tirar las plantas! Hola.
Wow, I love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
They're teasing it.
Tengo mis 3 grams. Thank you so much, mis 3 grams.
Yeah.
Ahora sí ya te puedo decir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I'm just going to show at the very end here, like some of the other work that we've been doing in this space. So some of the work that we've been doing is these field experiments with robots. And one of the questions it raises, like, where are the places where it's good to have robots, and you know, where is it less convenient? And one of the things that we notice is like, you know, some of the trash, you know, which would be great for a trash bell to be able to pick up, are also reasons why it's very hard sometimes to navigate the sidewalks in New York City. Here we were actually working with a janitor. We spent some time following a janitor around, thinking about how the trash bell could help the janitor with his work. I just want to show you this aspect of that interaction. So you can see here, these are my research group, the students. They're talking to the janitor, and then in a little bit, he basically goes to do his job, and they just try to follow him. Simple little bumps, and then we have to be in a program that allows to go faster. Get over the bumps. So what's going on here is, in New York City, garbage is normally left out in bags as opposed to containers. And sometimes people who are looking for recycling will open those bags. And so it means that there's sometimes trash going down the street, even though the people whose trash it is actually had bagged it up and put it on the street as they're supposed to. And so they're having this exchange about the fact that the trash rail, in order to help the janitor with his job, actually needs to go on and off the sidewalk like the janitor does. And that's something that we haven't actually like developed a trash bell robot to do. One thing that we're really interested in is just like, what are the streets like? What are the places that are good, you know, to use robots or not? And we're able to draw from some work we've done on urban fingerprinting, where we're studying the traffic, you know, and the traffic interaction patterns throughout New York City, where we had large data sets of the dash cam views from many Uber, Lyft cabs. And so we were able to kind of use computer vision on the data sets of these from the dash cam data sets to figure out a lot of things about the urban environment, just the things that we see every day and have a feeling for. We were able to kind of analyze that scale across all of Manhattan. And so one of the things that we're Manhattan, New York City, and like this kind of thing is really, really dense in New York City. But here is just the mapping of all the kinds of similar images from the similar database in San Francisco. And you can see that the density is quite high. I think it would be interesting to do this kind of analysis worldwide. But I think it's possible that we're going to have a lot more information about the environment. And one of the things that we can do with that is do these analyses. Like, here is where we have police deployments in the city. Here are places where in New York City we have like different kinds of scaffolding, some of which is not permitted. And we can even figure out where things are the most dense and most crowded. We call this the most claustrophobic or not. And so one of the things that we can do is bring that kind of research into the understanding of like what it is that robots can do. And in fact, we could even use robots to help gather information for this kind of research. And so this was something that we presented at CHI in 2025, this analysis of like what kinds of streets are there, where are places that are easy to deploy robots, what are places that are hard. And I think this is a thing that whether you want it to be easy or hard in your neighborhood, I think might be actually up to the community, but it's nice to have this map. And as part of this research, my university press office made this video, not actually, well, so this is the research video that we made, and I'll show you the one that our university press office made. And then here's the promised video. I want to point out it's got a nature video theme. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm missing that other video that I promised. Let's see. Sorry, I will go to takeaways, and maybe in the Q&A we might be able to get to this other video I dangled before you. Hold on a second. So now you know this is live. So here are some takeaways. Robots are being introduced to social urban environments now, and they encounter some challenges because people have latent understandings for how the robot should interact, and that understanding is really critical for the robots to do well. And people are communicating those expectations all the time, and so not being open to that kind of input also would breed frustration. So novel methods for field experimentation and doing urban scale research are really important to be able to adapt the robots to all the different kinds of places they're going to deploy. You can see my research is just focused in New York City already, how many different kinds of environments and contexts and interactions the robot is contending with in this environment. We really need to be doing this kind of research worldwide. Any place where people would use help doing what they need to do, we need to be thinking about how that would be possible. And one thing that we encountered in a lot of places is this question of how data gets captured and stored and shared is high in the minds of citizens. People expect the robots to be sensing and capturing things well enough that they can have continuous interactions, even over multiple episodes across many days with the same robot, but they don't really want that information to be shared with the government. And so thinking about how we communicate how information is captured and who can see it is really important. Okay, so with that, I will wrap up and then I'll go to the Q&A with Guillaume.
Yeah, so thank you, Wendy. I mean, I think it was a very, very fascinating presentation, and you showed us like truly that that robots are not just these technical systems moving through space, but really social actors entering environments with lots of expectations, routines, and public norms. And these field experiments, they are really practical and and they made us think really how people often assume how robots can understand speech, remember previous encounters, coordinate with one another, but maybe we're not there even
Yeah,
technically,
right.
So no, that was really great to learn, and we would really want to hear from our audience. So if you have any questions, please share them in the AI for Good neural network chat room. And while we wait, I would like to ask you, Wendy, a few follow-up questions. So I think one of the things I found especially striking is this, like how quickly people projected intelligence onto the robot. So they really expected how to understand them, to remember what happened before. So what does that tell us about the gap between what robots can currently do and what people naturally expect them to do in the public space?
Yeah, there's I think in the 80s, Hans Moravec actually coined this thing called Moravec's paradox, which is that all sorts of things that we humans find hard, like playing chess or Go, like it's actually much easier for a machine,
Yeah.
And actually all sorts of things that we think are really easy, like just perceiving things or picking things up, things that we take for granted. These are actually really, really hard for robots and machines. And so one of the things that I think is going on is that people take social interaction for granted. Obviously, if you think about evolution, I'm sure the animals that preceded humans were also socially interacting. And so here is something, before we were even a species was going on. And so we never think about it. The coordination, the communication and the kind of ability to understand intent and then cooperate, these are things we take for granted. And I think people don't even think it's, a feat, an intelligence feat for a robot to do that. And these are things that are incredibly hard for robots to do. It is exactly a nightmare. As when I show this to roboticists, they're like, oh my God, I just see all sorts of horrible things we have to do that I don't know how to do. And I think this paradox is really striking when we're in these urban spaces. But it's good to know. And I think, I'm optimistic. I think both that we can take these things on and we have to if we're going to use robots in spaces around people.
No, for sure. No, thanks for this, Wendy. And I think like building on this, you were mentioning that you haven't seen like yet a commercial company like really fully ready for this, urban deployment that where we achieve this true human robot interaction. So how we see that many companies are still focused on movement, navigation, while the public is actually expecting a way higher level of social understanding. So how do you see, when do you see, and what are the next developments for having these robots being deployed with this higher level of human robot interaction?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some robots, particularly social robots, where they have very sophisticated speech, interaction. They have long conversations. I think that the LLM technology will power that along. And I could name a few, but I think everyone probably, has their favorite robot, they like a chatty robot. I think the thing that's interesting is that the robots that have a more purely functional, we've always kind of separated, like there's these social robots that people will talk to, and these functional robots, which are just machines that are doing their job. They require sensing and perception in the environment. And one of the things that my research shows is that people are also socially interacting with those. They're not having long conversations. They're not telling the garbage can about their grandchildren, but there's a lot of interaction that's occurring, and people expect the robot to learn interesting specific things about the context of the environment, how the interaction should unfold. And so I think that's the thing that is challenging, because the kind of thing that needs to be encoded is not the sort of things that LLMs, have been trained to have conversations about. And I feel like in some ways, the only way to get the data about how to interact is to deploy the robot to get the information. So we have a chicken and egg problem, which we've been solving using Wizard of Oz, but I think is one for commercial deployments. One of the big questions is how to take on that challenge at scale.
Okay, and I have another question that I found very interesting is the how people seem more concerned with whose robot it was than with how the robot actually worked. So what does this tell us about this trust and legitimacy in the public space? Is like really public acceptance of robots just about governance and accountability as it is about design?
Right. Yeah, I think people are really, I think that even though we're not thinking about it all the time, we're aware of all these like social, institutions and factors that are in our lives. And so when you see a new technology, then maybe the big question of like that will dictate how people will respond to it is what is that? Whose robot is it? And what is the relationship of myself to that, institution? Is it like, does it belong to the cafe and I'm a customer? Does it belong to the city? I'm a taxpayer, or I'm a visitor. And I think this is the kind of thing that will shape the way that people know that they're supposed to interact with the robot, which in some ways that's an experiment we haven't yet run. Like if we vary the institution that the robot is affiliated with, how does that change the interaction norms? Because that is something that everyone was really asking about, and clearly care a lot about. And that is something that's really worth exploring. And it tells you something about how every robot you have to do some research to see how that robot should behave, because all these contextual elements, where it is, what the ground is like, what people are doing, whose robot it is, that will shape the interaction and the interaction patterns.
For sure. And how do you, because we're getting here now a question about regulation from our audience. So are there towns or cities or countries that have adopted regulations for sidewalk robots?
I think I've seen some regulation, mostly permitting, like robots to move. I think it's a state of Pennsylvania in the US had something that was allowing robots to move 15 miles an hour. And that is actually incredibly fast, for something that could be very heavy and fall on people. I think if I were going to make a regulation, I would make it slower. But so I think what we can see is that there's a feeling that this technology is coming, and an understanding that there needs to be some kind of governance. But exactly what the governance needs to be, we don't know, because we haven't had the robots. We don't understand what the dangers are. We don't understand what people are concerned about. And so the kind of research that I'm doing now, I think, is the thing that we should be doing before we make regulation, because we will more easily see what kind of makes sense and what possible abuse cases are if we do these experiments, rather than just, encouraging companies just to try things out, as beta deployments in our towns.
Yeah, and as you know, the ITU is a standard setting organization.
Mm-hmm.
We have been quite active in the AI space. Actually, we have our recommendation ITU Y4607 establishes requirements for the interworking of autonomous urban delivery robots. So how do you think, we were having this question about regulation, but how do you think there is need for standards and other tools to ensure that once we deploy urban embodied AI systems in the urban spaces, we ensure that the interaction layer is compliant with certain methodologies, with certain good practices. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I basically think before a robot is deployed any place, there should be some period, like a supervised pilot period. And this is a situation where there's basically synchronous oversight of all the robots as they're going through, because I think there's a lot of situations that crop up that in the moment a human is seeing it, they would know what to do, but if you didn't program the robot, in advance to deal with it, the likelihood that it will deal with it correctly is really low. And so I think people feel there's actually so much of an emphasis on autonomy that we have to make sure that they're fully autonomous and don't need any help before we deploy it. The companies will basically make sure that it is autonomous, but they will not actually. The thing that would actually be more important is to actually deploy even a not fully autonomous machine and get the information about what the contextual factors are and to address them. So I don't know if that can be done through standards or legislation, but I think it needs to be the norm that there is something like a pilot deployment and the expectation that there should be synchronous communication. And then I don't know if maybe the thing that actually needs to be regulated is just the way in which you move from the things that can crop up in these deployments towards, solutions. Because I think we could make general standards about speed, or height to avoid things like people being run over or children being, having a machine fall on them. But I think a lot of the most critical things to understand, like it's hard to understand without being in the field.
Excellent. So I think that you mentioned as well during your talk the question of space and place, especially like the different types of interactions of like really the same robot, but how it changed across neighborhoods, the people there, the local context. So how should designers and companies think about that? Is the idea of a urban robot for all cities or even parts of the city? So how do you think developers and companies need to go about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a situation where there could be a lot of different solutions. It could be we picked the trash bale robot, but in some ways our mobile platform could be put under many other kinds of furniture, like infrastructure. And I'm really interested in the mobile interaction, that people have. One thing that we are doing separate from the trash barrel study is an engagement with people in the Navy Yard of Brooklyn to help develop community robots, because there are things that the community, like the residents, have been grappling with, things like trash, dog poop. And there are things that if there was an inexpensive and easy enough robot to deploy, that they would want communally to develop. And that's the kind of robot I would really like to see more of, the things which are for people and the needs that they have identified themselves. And so we're trying to understand, what they would want and build something that is kind of appropriate for that group.
Okay.
And I think having more robots in that space where they're low cost and really community run would be great.
Okay, amazing. So we have one last question for you, Wendy, and it's like really based on everything that you have seen in these field studies, what would need to change for urban robots to be truly for everyday city life, not just technically functional, but really working in a socially accepted manner and genuinely useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to give the robot some basic understandings of proximity, that we need to basically have the robots understand people. I think initially when we were picking waypoints for the robot, like that's something that we did, but really it should be people from, who are in the community who are using the robot that would making those decisions. So I think the ability to take direction is important, the ability to basically be corrected. So I mentioned some of these delivery robots having problems with things like cordoned off areas. These are moments where the normal behaviors that we have all learned about how you're supposed to use public spaces and sidewalks break down, but we also recognize them as these things that mark that exception and require kind of novel behavior. And people also don't know what to do those situations, but they know how to understand the instructions they're given in those situations. And robots neither understand that it's not a normal situation, nor do they understand how to take direction. And then I think when you have a robot that takes direction, then you also have to think about how the robot knows whether, what it's doing is something it should do or shouldn't do. And so I think this kind of the robot's trust in the people is another interesting question, that will crop up as we start to get into this space. But these are all interaction issues. And I think that's the larger theme, which is that there are a lot of interaction issues, even for machines that are autonomous, if they're around people. And those are the things that we need to be exploring more and insisting that the technologies are designed with.
Excellent. So with this, Wendy, we were really grateful to have you on board for this session. And thank you to everyone that joined us today. I think it was truly a fascinating, deep dive into social expectation, social interaction layer of robots when deployed in urban environments. So thanks, Wendy, for this. And again, we encourage you to explore our AI for Good program online, where you'll find more upcoming sessions on robotics and embodied AI. So this brings us to the end of today's AI for Good Discovery event, and I will now hand back the floor to Anna for the closing information. Thank you very much, Wendy. Bye-bye.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learnt something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. We invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the e-shop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for Good.